Welcome to another edition of the Baer Facts, and sadly, the last. I know. You make it like.
Please go ahead.
A Family Guy episode where it's just really awkward because you just keep going and going and going. The last edition, mainly for a lot of reasons, which you can find on KyleLacey.com, of course. But we wanted to give you an overview, right, Jay, of the year. And when we were talking before we started recording, we realized that neither of us remembered anything that really happened this year.
It was too much year. There was too much year to fit into one show.
I think it's airplanes and hotels and peanuts and pretzels.
It's oxygen deprivation.
It's got to be, and just absolutely crazy travel. So
yes,
we're going to give you the top 5 that has actually happened in the past 5 days. And we're going to do a little bit different way, since this is the last Baer Facts. I am going to announce the 5, and Jay is going to talk about it, and I am going to do illustrations of what Jay is saying. So, with that being
this is
said,
sort of like the Pictionary episode of the Baer. This would have been this would have been better if you didn't know what they were, and you just had to in real time like translate what I was saying. Like those conferences, right, where they do the visual note-taking people. That's
that would
it.
have been perfect.
That's it. Okay. Well, you know what?
Well,
maybe we'll do another one next week. Maybe
maybe.
we'll forestall our conclusion.
Maybe maybe it can be a thing going on. We can just do Pictionary with Kyle and Jay.
Oh, I love that idea. We can get Pictionary. Who makes that game? Milton Bradley? Let's get a sponsor on this deal.
Yeah.
They got to be a client of yours, right? Sure.
Yeah, they will. They will be.
So, yes, as Kyle said, this is not all the things that happened this year because we couldn't remember them, but these are things that happened this week. Number one, Uber now has a $40 billion valuation, making Uber a more valuable company than things like General Motors, General Electric, Microsoft, I think maybe even Apple. It's insane. Look, I'm a huge Uber fan, as many people who watch the Baer Facts probably are, but it seems hard to believe that you can have a $40 billion valuation for a company that doesn't actually make anything or, frankly, do anything. It is a $40 billion valuation for being a middleman, which seems to be a little bit shocking. Now we're even going to see an investment from Baidu out of China, $600 million investment coming into Uber, which is pretty fascinating because that sends a very strong signal that they are bullish for Uber's prospects in China. And you start thinking about the size of that market. And so maybe these guys have a long way to go. And certainly geographically, right? They do. It's not like Uber is in, all the smaller second, third tier cities, even in the U.S. So there's a lot of expansion. In fact, I saw an article from their board recently that said they really believe their growth is going to come overseas, not in the U.S. So time will tell. I think 40 billion is a little steep, but we'll see. Second thing this week on a somewhat related front, the sharing economy, if you will, the collaborative economy is Airbnb has announced that they're now over 1 million homes in their database, which is an awful lot of places that you can stay on somebody's couch or their guest room, etc. And they are adding 3,000 new homes a day. And every time they add, what was that stat, Kyle? Every time they add a city,
it's a 1% increase in bed count. It's a 0.05% decrease for hotel revenue, which was a study done by Boston University last year, 2013.
So we have a direct correlation between Airbnb showing up in a market and hotel revenue falling, which certainly stands to reason. As somebody who stays in hotels consistently, like Kyle,
yep.
I don't know that I would give up the convenience of that. But I did do a couple of Airbnbs for business recently for a couple of weird circumstances, and it was really great. I got to tell you, I really had a good experience. Now, the lack of consistency in that experience is probably one of the challenges for Airbnb for business. But again, a huge opportunity moving forward. Third thing that happened this week is that Instagram announced that they just surpassed 300 million users. 300 million users, which, depending on how you count, right? neither Instagram nor Twitter are very good at breaking out for the press total users, meaning people who have actually created an account, versus monthly active or daily active users. But there is some speculation based on some of those data points that Instagram actually has a larger, active user base now than Twitter, which is amazing to consider, right? I mean, Twitter has been in that sort of second place position for quite some time now. You see their increasing desperation at Twitter to gain growth. They're getting a lot of pressure for investors to grow faster and faster, and they're just not. Their growth is slowing down, and so they're trying to be more and more like Facebook. All the things that Twitter is adding, both on the advertising side and even the consumer side, is trying to make it more like Facebook. I'm on record as saying that's absolutely not going to work. The same reason it didn't work for Google+. Instagram is, however, a different animal, right? It is its own thing, and they're not adding a bunch of ornaments to that Christmas tree and saying, now Instagram Plus does this other thing and this other thing and this other thing over here. It does one or two things, does them really well. People really like it. And in this era of visual and multimedia communication, very, very bullish on Instagram going forward.
I'm really bad at this, Jay.
Oh, you're amazing. I'm not sure what all the pluses are, but I can't wait for the comments on this. The YouTube comments on this are going to be, and I'm just going to encourage you right now, ladies and gentlemen, as we're about 2/3 of the way through this, to please do leave your YouTube comments on Kyle's artistic endeavors here. It's going to be fantastic as a little going away present for Kyle. Fourth one this week is LinkedIn is rolling out a brand new homepage. If you haven't seen it yet, you'll start to see it pretty soon when you log back in. And it is the next step in LinkedIn's evolution away from being a job-focused social network and toward becoming a real content empire. As you know, we've talked about it here on this show. Just about anybody can now publish on LinkedIn. It's almost like Medium, if you will, or a blogging engine. So you've got lots and lots of people, including myself, writing content on the LinkedIn platform. And so going forward, I don't believe LinkedIn's competition is Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Google+. LinkedIn's competition is Fast Company and Inc. and the Wall Street Journal. And you start thinking about, okay, well, what does that mean? The good news is it puts them in a different competitive set. The bad news is I think it moves them out of being a technology company and into being a publishing company, which I find interesting because your valuation for publishing companies is a lot lower than it is for technology companies. But it's not like they don't have technology. Of course they do. They're LinkedIn. But I just think it's an interesting move. But it seems to be working. And the other thing that we've talked about here before, which never gets mentioned very often, is that LinkedIn bought SlideShare and did it pretty quietly. And I think that strategically is going to be a huge, huge win for them over time as more and more people, mostly business people and companies, start to gravitate towards SlideShare as a really rich part of their overall content marketing solution. I think that's going to prove to be an incredibly smart investment. And the fifth thing this week, Kyle mentioned spending time in the air, as we do. I'm actually home for a few weeks, which is fantastic. But the next time I travel, it will be interesting to see this. United Airlines is issuing 23,000 iPhone 6 Pluses, that's the big one, to all their flight attendants to handle all the onboard payments and stuff, all that kind of thing. So instead of having what they've had in the past, which are, I think, some sort of custom-made, clunky, Frankenstein software, they're all going to use iPhone 6 Pluses, which I assume they'll have their crew schedule on there and a bunch of other things, intra-company communication. So really fascinating to see. And I don't know what the deal terms were on that, but, the back of all those have a giant Apple logo. And you start thinking about what is the branding value, the net impressions value of something like that, right? Every single flight attendant on what is, the biggest or second biggest airline in the United States, and every flight attendant is showing you an Apple logo in your face for the entire, duration of your flight. I don't know how you would even calculate those impressions. I'm sure it is calculable, but it's got to be huge. So I don't know if that was if they bought those phones or they did a trade, but I think that's really interesting, and we should look into that a little bit more in depth. So those were the 5 things that happened this week that we thought were interesting here on the final graphically rich version of the Baer Facts.
See Steve Jobs laughing from...
Oh, is that what that was? I thought that was God.
Well, Steven.
601.
All right, well, That's another edition, the last edition, Jay. It has been a pleasure, of course.
It's been real.
I will see you in an airport more than likely.
Good night and good luck.
Good night.